during the 2016 election, and this was when all the candidates were still in the field. And I said, if you have, forget what your politics are. Forget whether you're left or right, libertarian, socialist, left of center, right of center, whatever your politics may be. I said, if you have any principles, this race should only be between Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, and Rand Paul. That's it. Because they are the only ones who can claim they didn't support the war in Iraq. If you supported the war in Iraq, the nerve, the unmitigated nerve you have to think that you should be president. Now, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt on everything. Let's just say they didn't lie us into the war. They didn't know full well that this was complete bullshit. This wasn't some neocon plan from years before, which, of course, all of that is true. But let's just say that's not true. Let's just say it was a mistake. What Robert Mueller just said right there, it was just a mistake. We got it wrong, We just made the wrong decision. We had the wrong intelligence. We made the wrong vote. So you just made an honest mistake. But your honest mistake results in destroying a country. 1 million people dead, probably 15 million people displaced. Probably, I don't know how many of our own troops, probably in the tens of thousands if you add up the killed, the wounded, the ones who have committed suicide, whose lives are just in shambles, the ones who are just, suffering from chronic depression and, and for that, it cost $2 trillion. For that nightmare, you drained $2 trillion from the American people. If you make that bad of a mistake, the idea, the nerve that you would go, I think I should be given a lot more authority. I think the next time a decision that big comes up, I should be the one who gets to make it. Can you imagine? In what field, in what universe would you be like, yeah, that guy is not disqualified from this gigantic promotion? So if you had any inkling of principle, you would go, this race is Bernie Sanders, Rand Paul, and Donald Trump, because they're the only ones who can actually say Bernie Sanders was in Congress and voted against the Iraq war, along with some other principled, people who voted against that, like Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich. And Rand Paul, of course, I've taken shots at Rand Paul on the show, but he wasn't in the Senate yet, but Rand Paul was not going to support the war in Iraq. I think that's fair to say. So those guys have a right to run for it. Everybody else involved had that blood on their hands. And even if you don't take the obvious conspiratorial view, which is that they lied us into this war, even if it's just a mistake, you should never want to hear from those people again. Okay, let's say we're not charging you all with war crimes. We're not actually holding you responsible for what you guys did here. At a minimum, you would say, go away. Go away from being an elected representative. You don't get to make these calls anymore. You got it so profoundly wrong. And of course, it's not only that. The stuff that I just laid out before. The war in Iraq is really what was the opening of Pandora's box to destroying the entire Middle East and Northern Africa, to the refugees flooding into Europe. Everything starts there. Just go away. Go back into private life. You don't get to make these decisions anymore. And likewise, for someone like Mueller to even take him seriously as an investigator who's going to get to the bottom of this, how is that little video clip not just disqualifying? You were up there just ratcheting up fear right after 9/11. Right after the country had been through something genuinely traumatic, And you're right up there just going well, Saddam's going to put chemical weapons in the hands of terrorists and these WMDs, and that's our real concern. We got to go for this. So how do you ever take that person seriously again?
Yeah.
Only in the world of government and politics do people who f on that level get promotions.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's a conflict of interest that he used to be the head of the FBI. This is essentially a war between the FBI as the deep state. We're going to use the title the deep state.
No, against one very important organization in the deep state.
Against elected officials. Mm-hmm. The beginning of this investigation is basically wiretappings and fake reporting by the FBI in order to kickstart an investigation into the president. which we're now, hopefully, through Barr, going to unravel to see who's working against elected officials. But this guy, as having been the head of the FBI, I think was the wrong person to lead the investigation into whether or not the president would, like, that's part of the whole coup, you know?
Yes. Well, what they will say, what the kind of establishment response to this is they go, well, Mueller's a lifelong Republican. So he's a Republican.
Because the
so,
lifelong Republicans love Trump.
Right, exactly. But that's the world. This is how the whole game is played. I think it was Noam Chomsky who said the way you have like a manufactured consent, the way you like manufacture this whole situation is you have a very small window of allowable opinion, but then you allow for fierce fighting within that window.
Yeah.
So this is where you'll see, George W. Bush and Barack Obama can have a furious debate about whether the top marginal income tax rate should be 39% or 35%. But within that range, you can really debate it all out. But it's not like anybody's sitting there going like, being like, I think we should abolish the income tax. And someone else is going like, I think we should have massive redistribution. It's just the debate is right in here in this nice little window. So that's where they can go. Well, do you really think that Mueller was going to support Hillary Clinton? I mean, after all, this was George W. Bush's FBI director.
I mean, so all the people that love war a whole bunch?
Exactly. It's to anybody, and this is really, and the internet has done a lot, I think, to shatter what Tom Woods calls the 3x5 index card of allowable opinion. They've done a lot to shatter that, because if you are interested in these ideas, like forget what our own politics are. If you're just interested in this world, pretty quickly, what we all end up doing is you're online and you're listening to like a really interesting, intelligent socialist argue against a really interesting, intelligent libertarian, or a really interesting, intelligent, whatever, like constitutional conservative, or someone, I'm listening to Noam Chomsky and Pat Buchanan and Christopher Hitchens and like thinkers like that. You're not just like reducing the conversation to what CNN allows you to have. But if you are, that's their defense. It's like, no, well, this is George W. Bush's guy, so he hates Hillary Clinton more than anyone. I mean, sure, forget the fact that, like, they all hang out together and they all basically support the exact same policies. I mean, really, seriously, tell me what you think the difference in the politics are between George W. Bush, Hillary Clinton, Mitt Romney, and Barack Obama in terms of how they govern. They're minimal and trivial. There's a few. I mean, there's like a few differences between what special interest they'll go after. There's a difference in rhetoric for sure. Like Hillary Clinton will like pay lip service to like feminism and stuff like that more. But in terms of what they really do, I mean, anything that matters. Okay, what war would we have fought? I mean, Hillary Clinton voted for the war in Iraq. She led the fight for the war in Libya. She, like all of these, that foreign policy, Hillary Clinton is a neocon hawk just as much as anyone else is. She's what Lou Rockwell calls the left-wing neocons. Basically the same thing. In terms of domestic policy, spending levels would be about the same. Monetary policy would be exactly the same under either one of them. In terms of like mass incarceration, the prison industrial complex, all this stuff would be exactly the same. It's very minimal. Maybe under Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, you get a little bit more money to a company like Solyndra. Under Bush, you'd get a little bit more money toward an oil company, but it's basically the same thing. So yes, if you realize that this whole fight was about the deep state and the establishment against Trump, then yeah, Mueller's just another one of their guys. But after seeing that tape, it just seems to me that it's reasonable to go like, if we were serious, like in a serious adult civilized society, you would go, oh, well, I'm never gonna put any value in what this person says again as an investigator. I think that's reasonable. I would go a lot further and be like, there should be criminal investigations against all these people who lied us into a war where like 1 million people died. That would be, I think reasonable. Just common sense approach. If you say, because this just gets repeated so much, so it's the great lie that if you just repeat it over and over again, everyone's eventually going to believe it. But you go, the Russians interfered in our election. So that's true. That's what our report has confirmed. Russians interfered in our election. Now, just to you, as a regular person, let's just say you haven't been living in this zoo for the last 2 years, and you heard someone interfered in your election. What does that mean to you? I mean, I would think that would refer to something like breaking into voting machines, changing votes, maybe having, Russian nationals use fake papers to vote in elections, right? Wouldn't you, interfering in our elections, wouldn't you think that meant somehow, like, I don't know, interfering in our elections?
Yep.
Right? Isn't that what,
intense? Sounds like they were holding back voters or threatening them with a knife in the booths.
And every way, the way it's slick. I give this guy credit. He's just an old deep state spy. Like, he's got this very, like, methodical, boring, and I'm official because I'm clearly a guy who doesn't even fuck his own wife. Like, you have to believe. I mean, how would you not trust my incredibly long face? So he's got that down. But he says these things. It's very tricky the way he says it. But he goes, Russians used a sophisticated cyber attack in order to steal information from the Clinton campaigns and then disseminate this information through fake social media accounts. It's like, right, so fake social media accounts. But what about the info? Was that fake? Now, okay, you can say the information was stolen. Sure. And you can say that that's a crime to steal information. But you know what other information was stolen? The Pentagon Papers. That was stolen. But, it revealed war crimes. So, in general, journalists and people... Now, I don't think you would sit here and be like, Daniel Ellsberg interfered in our democratic process. It's like, well, I mean, I guess technically, if you want to use it in that loose of a term, he did. What even Mueller is saying is that their interference campaign consisted of, this is how they attacked our elections, was that they informed the American people of real information of corruption. Not like small little nothing corruption, like really important things that we should know. It, like, no matter what your politics are, it would be stuff that you'd say, this is information that the American people should know. Like the DNC is cheating to steal it from Bernie Sanders, or Hillary Clinton is colluding with the mainstream media. This is all like information that's worth knowing. Or John Podesta is running a child sex trafficking ring. This is stuff we need to know. That last one may not be true, but it may be. But you know what I mean? So it's very sophisticated language to be like, basically, this very sophisticated information was, there was a hack. I still haven't seen, even in the report, I haven't seen any actual proof laid out that there was a hack by the Russians. But, WikiLeaks still claims that the Russians had nothing to do with giving them the information. I'll tell you, now that Assange is going to trial, maybe we're going to learn some more about this. By the way, aside on that, Julian Assange is being tried under the Espionage Act. For all these people in the media who are like so concerned that Donald Trump this is the rise of fascism, and yet none of them, those same people, are not outraged that he's using the Espionage Act, a World War I law that literally Woodrow Wilson was going around arresting
for Japs
journalists. No, it was pre-Japs.
Oh,
World War I.
I was way off.
Yeah, whatever. No, but this was to go around and to shut down the anti-war movement.
Right. So
Woodrow Wilson was arresting journalists. So that's what we've got there is, anyway, that's an aside. But so this is what we start with. Russia attacked our democracy. Dangerous language. For somebody who's heard a lot this last week about dangerous language, a lot because if somebody, I don't know, if you have like a right-wing, provocative, gay, guy on your podcast, it's like this language is dangerous. Well, what's dangerous? You're talking about a nuclear-armed country and saying they've attacked us. Well, what's the response to being attacked? Shouldn't we hit them back? As between the United States of America and Russia, we combined own 90% of the nuclear weapons in the world. Maybe if you're going to talk about dangerous rhetoric, anything that would be pushing those two countries toward a violent conflict, that'd probably be the most dangerous rhetoric in the history of rhetoric.